Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be using two new dies from Simon Says Stamp, the I Adore You die and the Triangle Element die. And I'm going to be revisiting a technique with watercolors that I did a little over a year ago. And I came across it on my blog and I was like, oh, I forgot about this technique. I want to try it again. So I'm going to be doing some faux dip dye with watercolor. I'm using some Arches cold press watercolor paper and I'm cutting it down so that it's just a little bit larger than my actual finished card. I'm starting out by doing the torn edge on the very bottom, and this is going to be at the very bottom of the card. So I actually made the height of this watercolor paper quite a bit taller than an actual card. I think it's about 6 inches tall at this point. So I'm tearing off just about a half an inch. It doesn't have to be exact because I am going to be trimming this down eventually. So softening the edge with water makes it much easier to tear the very thick watercolor paper, but you could skip that step if you want. I've taped it down to a hard surface here, and now I'm going to be using my watercolors. This is the Kuretake Gansai Tambi palette. I have to think about that for a minute. It's Kuretake Zig Gansai Tambi palette, and I'm wetting the entire surface of my watercolor paper before I start painting. I'm going to be doing a little bit of an ombre look, going from a yellow to a green to a very, very dark green black. So I'm starting out with the yellow shade and I'm adding that on and softening the top edge a little bit more. And then I'm going to use my heat tool to speed up the drying process. Now, for this entire technique, there's a lot of drying involved. You have to dry in between every single layer. So you could let this air dry if you want to, but to speed things along, it really is helpful to have a heat tool. So I put on that more intense yellow, softened the top edge, and then dried it. For each one of these layers of color, I'm going to bring the color a little bit farther down on my watercolor paper and extend it all the way to that torn edge. That's going to make it so that the torn edge has a lot of color building up at the bottom. And that's exactly the look we're going for, because in an actual dip dye situation, you would be dropping this paper into dye. Like it would be like a big container of dye, so you can put that paper all the way down in and it would soak up the color, and then you'd pull the paper back out. That's the look we're going for. So I've moved on to mixing the yellow with this kind of aqua green shade, and I just wanted a little bit more of a transition of color between the yellow and the darker greens, so that's why I mixed those colors together. So now I've got that pure aqua green color. I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to dry it after each one of these layers, and then I'll move on to a darker shade. At this point, I realized that I was putting these different color variations very close together, and I had a long way to go until the very bottom of this torn edge, so I knew I would have to intensify the color quite a bit. So I've started mixing that kind of mid-tone green shade with a darker blue, and I'm going to be taking this all the way from a yellow to a green to a blue to a black. So here's that blue coming in, and I'm just getting that color transition. Originally, I did not plan to have this go to a very, very dark blue and then to black. I'm kind of glad that it did, because it gives it a little bit more of a better transition of color. But I also lost a little bit of the dip dye look where you have those very defined steps of color, because I did want it to have it blend a little bit. So I'm adding in more color, trying to intensify that shade all the way to the bottom of that torn edge. And then I'm going to add in some black. And this black is really going to get this super, super dark here at the bottom, but it is the look I was going for. So when I did this technique before, I did a pink red to a violet and then to a very, very dark violet at the bottom, and I absolutely love that look. This one, I think, has a little bit more variation in color, because it goes from yellow to like limey green to blue to black. There's a few more shades in there, but I do love how it turned out. I did go back over a few of those transition colors just to make sure it wasn't such a stark step from the green to the blue. And then I dried this, making sure that everything was there. So I'm going to peel up my masking tape here, and you can see what a clean edge that masking tape gives. I love doing this, even though I'm going to be cutting off that white border. I do love how it looks. So I've trimmed this down so that the entire piece is a little bit smaller than a 5.5 by 4.25 card. And then I cut the triangle element die 4 times. I'm going to build that up and have a really thick die cut on my card. So I needed to cut that out 4 times. And I just cut it out of some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. I've now got some gold foil cardstock and also a Stick It adhesive sheet. This is a very, very thin adhesive that you can put behind your cardstock before you die cut it so that it has adhesive all on the back of the die cut. And I'm doing this because the I Adore You die is pretty dainty, and I thought it would really help me when it comes to adhering it. So I ran that through my Spellbinder's Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and then I had to put together all these dies. So I thought I'd show you this technique for putting these dies together. I did say there are 4 layers, so I had to adhere this 3 times and then another time onto my project. I used some Gina K Connect glue and dabbed a dot of glue in each one of these triangle corners. I then pressed it onto a scratch paper just to get off some of that excess glue, and then pressed it down onto the top of the other die cut. So doing the little dabbing it off on a scratch paper, I think I saw that in a video from Debbie Hughes recently, and I was like, oh, that's brilliant, because most of the time when I adhere die cuts together, it kind of squeezes out the glue, and I've got excess glue on the sides. But by just dabbing off a little bit of that excess glue onto a scratch paper, it gets rid of any of that glue that might ooze out from underneath. Using my tweezers to place that just perfectly onto my watercolor piece. And then I used a craft pick to punch out the gold letters from the I Adore You die. So I realized that I wouldn't be able to put these directly onto that triangle element die cut because these are very, very dainty and it wouldn't have a whole lot of surface to adhere to. So I thought it would be best to adhere them first to a piece of vellum, and then it would also give a little bit more stability to those dies. So there is not a shadow die cut for the I Adore You die, so I'm using a pencil and drawing kind of a margin around the outside of this die, and then I'm going to use my scissors to cut it out, just kind of fussy cut all the way around. And it did take a little bit of time, but I think it's completely worth it. It really makes these dies stand out when they're put together like this on vellum and then cut out. It also gives you more surface area to put your adhesive. So I took my pencil and just cleaned up those edges before I adhered it, and then I used that same Connect glue from Gina K Designs and adhered that directly onto that triangle element die cut. So the last I'm going to do is prep my card base. I have some more Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock, and I've scored that at 5.5 to create a top folding card. Put some foam adhesive behind my watercolor piece, and then press that down onto the card front. And that's the card for today. It's a really simple and clean and simple looking card, but there is a little bit of technique when it comes to that faux dip dye effect on the watercolor paper. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you check out the new dies and stamps over at simonstamp.com, and I'll see you in another video very soon.